Hello, it's Jen the Liberty Lion, and today is the 5th of January 2026. This is a current event video, and I want to talk to you about Venezuela, but we're also going to talk about jurisdiction, and I'm going to mention a few things that I think is confirmation of what I've been talking about in past videos as far as being a citizen. So let's just go over what a few people are saying about um, Venezuela. Um, war with Venezuela. It does not really seem like a war when you just walk in and take over. I'm sure there was a little fighting back, but I'm not sure that equates to war. So the Associated Press says that Cuba says they lost 32 officers in the U.S. operation in Venezuela, that Cuban military and police officers were carrying out a military mission at the request of Venezuela's government. What the mission was is unknown, but Cuba is an ally of Venezuela and has been performing such operations for years. So Trump said there was a lot of death on their side, meaning Cuba and Venezuela, but no reported deaths of American soldiers of the United States. The U.S. military operation obtained both President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, who both will face prosecution, in an indictment accusing them of participating in a narco terrorism conspiracy. Marco Rubio pointed out that the Cuban involvement in Venezuela included taking part in Venezuela's internal security and were said to be propping up Maduro. Rubio also said that Maduro's spy agency was full of Cubans. Daniel Davis points out that U.S. Special Forces performed a quick and offensive snatch and grab of Maduro and his wife, of Maduro because of Maduro participating in narco terrorism. So Davis makes a few points in his video that came out, I think, a couple days ago. And I want to go over some of these points that he makes. So he says, it's odd that Maduro knew the US was coming and was still able to be captured. So what was he doing? Was he hiding? Was he um, running away somewhere? What was he doing? So I've heard two people say two different things. Davis says that he was on his way into a location where he could be locked in or he could lock it from the outside, but was caught just before that. Yet another person says that the US snatched them while they were sleeping in their beds. Davis also says there is no constitutional justification for the attack. Article 2 does not say anything that Trump or his team has said gives them authorization to attack Venezuela. So Trump is saying that Article 2 of the Constitution allows him to attack Venezuela, and he's got a bunch of government people on his side saying the same thing. Um, but Davis is saying there's no constitutional justification for it. Davis is a prior military. I'm not sure if he was a colonel or a general, but I agree with Davis. Davis says Trump justified the attack by claiming Venezuela emptied out their jails and mental institutions into America. And Davis says no evidence of this being the case. Sure, people have come in illegally, but saying that the government sponsored it in any way, meaning the Venezuela government, seems to lack any sort of proof. These are not direct quotes. These are his ideas that I'm letting you know that he said in his video. He says that Venezuela's head of state tried to do everything he could to keep the US from attacking, but Trump denied Venezuela's efforts at diplomacy, including Venezuela giving up some of their natural resources. It matters not who you are, who you support, or what side you're on. You should be worried about the ethical questions involved in the president mocking the Constitution or anyone who says we should follow it. So Trump and his administration are making fun of people who want the government to follow the Constitution. Okay, so he's mocking them, and Davis says that's a really um, steep, slippery slope. It just gets worse the further down you go. Mike Lee says that his interpretation of the Constitution means that the president can do almost anything he wants, at least in this matter. All you all know my opinion. Okay, this is me now. You know my opinion, and I think by now, um, I've addressed some of these situations in my previous videos, especially when it comes to the Constitution and what powers the government has and what powers they don't have, what powers the military has and what they don't have. So Davis says the president acted against the War Powers Act. He says this is even worse because the president acts with impunity. Davis continued saying that Trump basically has complete control over the government. And so even if people wanted to, they couldn't go against him. Ruben Gallego says, quote, second unjustified war in my lifetime. This war is illegal. It's embarrassing that we went from the world cop to the world bully in less than a year. There's no reason for us to be at war with Venezuela, end quote. A flat out regime change operation. Trump says he will install someone as a president of Venezuela instead of allowing the people to decide for themselves. Davis also says, as far as we know, no person has stood up for the Constitution and told Trump that he is wrong. Trump is not constrained by rule of law since the people under him are loyal to him and not to the Constitution and their oath. Trump has control of the government, and so nothing will happen to him. He is bulletproof and no one can stop him. America could end up in a full on war with Iran. And then he goes on to also mention um, that Trump and his actions are empowering or giving reason to other countries like Russia and China to align themselves against the United States. So now that's the end of Davis's videos and statements. So for me, Venezuela is not in the United States and therefore cannot be charged with a conspiracy against the United States for any of the laws the United States writes. Those laws that written by the United States are for the United States, and we see that in the enacting clauses. This is not something that you can intelligently argue. The enacting clause tells us not only who's making the law, but who the laws are for. So these laws apply only to the United States. I have made years and years worth of effort to explain to people what the United States is and what a citizen of the United States is. Venezuela is not under US jurisdiction and so cannot be charged with violating US laws. The US and the federal lands and the public law or War Powers Act does not apply to anyone outside the United States, and the United States are the federal lands, and its citizens are the people in the military. When you have people in the military, you cannot have them spying for another country. So there are strict laws, such as those in the War Powers Act, that applies to them, the people in the military, to discourage them from spying or conspiring against the United States. You can't take an oath to the United States and then turn around and spy for another country while serving in the military without having repercussions. Um, so Travis, the prepared homesteader, mentions something like what I'm saying, um, but less detailed. Very briefly, he just mentions it, stating that Venezuela is not in the US. Okay, we're talking about jurisdiction here. Venezuela is not part of the United States unless they have some sort of contract with the United States that they're going to follow US laws. If there is, I've never heard of it. Nobody that I've listened to has mentioned it. Then Venezuela is not under any obligation to follow our laws and so cannot be charged with a crime for not following laws that they aren't required to follow. So switching gears here, we're going to move to Travis the homesteader, the prepared homesteader. Also commented that Trump said we do not need a Congress anymore, um, and he would like to commission a military uniform for himself. Okay, so this opens up, um, I guess instead of a can of worms, a big cake, because I like that he said this, and I like that Trump said this, and I like that someone else besides me saying this, that the president would like to commission a military uniform for himself. This gets the party started, okay? Um, so for a long time, if you've been following me, that I've said repeatedly that there are two citizens. There's one for the United States and there's one for the states, and that's mentioned in Article 14. So I'll read to you what I've wrote here in my notes. So now commissioning a military uniform would make sense to me. George Washington had one, and he was the commander in chief of the United States. Okay, so the Constitution says the United States, the basically the armed forces and the Navy of the United States, not the United States of America. He's the executive officer of the United States of America. So he is the president over the states, which are the civilians, and then he's the president over the United States, which is the military. So he's executive of the states, which is United States of America, and then he is the commander in chief, which is a military title over the people of the United States. So to be a citizen of the United States, you have to be someone in the military. And this is a requirement for president to have 14 years military service. So George Washington had a military uniform, and he was commander in chief of the United States, which means the United States is the military and the military is the United States. And those in the military, commissioned, uncommissioned, or troops, are the citizens of the United States. We are not all citizens of the United States and not federal people and not under federal law, since we are not on federal lands, and therefore citizens, not citizens of the federal government or the military, which is a citizen of the United States. I feel I should mention here too that when you go to get your driver's license, it asks you if you're a citizen of the United States, because only citizens of the United States are required to get a driver's license. So all the presidents to be commander in chief must have had 14 years being a citizen of the United States. That is a military person. And most have not. Only a few have met this requirement. They should wear their military uniform if they are still in the United States or in the military, but they don't have to wear a uniform if they have served 14 years but then gotten out. So if they were in the military and was elected president, they would wear their uniform. If they were in the military but got out and was elected president, they would not have to wear their uniform. So they could just dress in civilian attire. Now tell me, which president have you ever seen wear a military uniform in the presidential office? I would say George Washington was the first and only one, and the Constitution was modeled to some extent after him in his life. So, let's see, George Washington wore his, but since Eisenhower was retired, he still had the 14-year minimum requirement of military service or citizenship on federal lands in the United States, but did not wear his uniform. He didn't have to because he was already retired, but he still met the requirement of being 14 years, at least 14 years service. 14 years in service, in the service. Okay, that's not just 14 years of being in politics or 14 years of serving people at the seat of government as a civilian, but 14 years military service. He did not have to be in military uniform. He just must have had been in the military for at least 14 years. If Trump wants to commission a military uniform, he must, in order to wear that uniform, join the military and become a commissioned officer. The Supreme Court also, because remember, we were talking about people interpreting the Constitution, and that's something I've talked about in my other videos, and we talked about tropes, how judges write their opinions and how often their opinions do not reflect the reality of what they're trying to say. They're instead using rhetoric and trying to persuade people to accept their opinions, which are sometimes nonsense. I have a book, and I don't remember what it was called or who wrote it, but as soon as I dig it out of my office, I'll point out a few things in there that I've already talked about, but to refresh our memories, I'll point out a few things in there about how judges write opinions that are persuasive more than factual. And the reason why I bring this up is because they interpret the Constitution, but they interpret it in any way they want. But what we should be doing is not only interpreting it, but staying within the text when we interpret it. Okay, we can't just go out of the text and just make anything up. We have to stay in the text. The Supreme Court, who also interprets the Constitution, whichever way the wind blows, and not following legal rules, unless they are then wrongly interpreting those rules, decide that an expansion of the idea of what a citizen of the United States is has caused a lot of problems and misinterpretation of the Constitution. Some have justified this strange interpretation or these strange interpretations and court opinions, which go against common sense, stating the founders never defined it. So some people are saying that the founders never defined what a citizen of the United States is, but we know that citizen means member. The United States is federal, so federal member. That doesn't mean um, you got elected as a congressperson and that made you a citizen of the United States, or you live at a certain place and that makes you a citizen of the United States. No, you have to be a member of it. You have to be in it. And I know that when a lot of people look at the Constitution and they say, members that Congress shall be members. Members of what? Not Congress. You're not members of Congress. You're members of the military in order to be in Congress. And that's the military Congress. So we have a military Congress. We also have a state Congress. So we have each individual state has a Congress in the state. All the states together have a Congress at the seat of government, but then the military is supposed to also have a Congress at the seat of government. Now, you can't change the Constitution, but they've tried to alter it and change it by passing laws in order to give one or the other more power. And it hasn't really worked because all they've done is feed a monster, the federal monster, and make it bigger and bigger and bigger, which then allows people like Trump to get into position and control the entire government system and say things like, well, we don't need Congress and I'm just going to wear a uniform and I'll just do whatever I want. And if I want to just go to war, I don't need Congress to say anything or do anything about it. Um, this is bad. This is really bad. I don't think people really understand that this is bad, how bad this is. So I've explained a lot of these things in my book, which has already been copyrighted. Quit. Um, it's already been copyrighted with the United States Copyright Office. So it's not like they're unaware that we are aware of these things. But I throw now your mind back to what Davis said, that Trump has control of the government. What can anyone do about it now? I don't know. I really don't. I don't know. He's unqualified since he was supposed to be qualified before he took office. And maybe that's why Maybe that's why he's saying he knows he needs a uniform, and maybe that's why he's saying, who cares about the Constitution? Because he knows they're not following it. He knows that he's not qualified for that office. And if he's not qualified for the office, everything that he does is illegitimate. Everything that any president has done that they didn't qualify for the office is all their acts are illegitimate acts. They come with no authority. They have no authority. Okay, so if you understand the importance then of qualifying for the office and that the qualifier is that you be 14 years for the president, a citizen of the United States, then you get where I'm going at here, right? Where we will go back and undo a lot of the unconstitutional things that they've tried to do, which would enhance freedom for us. Okay, so I don't know what we can do about it really. Other my thing here is just to try to educate people as best I can. Whatever you decide to do about it, I don't know. Maybe it's just listen to this video and talk to your friends. So Trump is unqualified since he was supposed to be qualified before he took office. Will he try to make himself appear qualified by commissioning for himself a military uniform? Well, sorry, it's too late. You have to qualify beforehand, not after. So there's a video out that I came across and I forgot to save it, but there's a woman arguing that illegal aliens were to be dealt with in civil courts, but her speaking opponent, the person she's debating with, um, threw out there that there was a federal law saying that illegal aliens were a federal matter, and I think he threw out Title 8. So I'm saying they're both right. Okay, depends on where the illegal alien is. Is he on federal lands or is he off federal lands? Is he in the state or is he within the federal government? So illegal aliens off federal lands, but in a state is a state matter, which would be civilian. When illegal aliens enter federal lands, such as a military post, even if those are people who are married to someone in the military, they're considered illegal aliens until they're given federal authority to be on the military post. So just because you marry a military person doesn't mean automatically you're um, allowed to be on the military post. There's old laws that state this, that they still have to apply for citizenship, and that's the federal citizenship to go with their husband or wife wherever they go. If, like say it's Vietnam and there's men over there in Vietnam and one of them marries a Vietnamese woman, she can't just marry him and then get on the military post and just be allowed to be on the military post because there's military things going on there. She could see and hear things that um could create a problem as far as her possibly being a spy or something. So the military wanted to be able to vet these people before they let them come back and go on military posts with people. So you got to take the oath and you got to become a citizen. And being a citizen of it means you're subject to the jurisdiction, 14th Amendment, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. It depends on where you're at. So if you're a federal citizen and you go to Vietnam, but you're serving as a federal person, you're still subject to Vietnamese laws, but you're subject also to federal laws. So if you're a military person in like Texas, you're subject to military law, but you're also subject to state law. Okay, you're not just because you were born a citizen of the United States. You're not just because you're born here, you're not a citizen of the United States. You're an American, but you're a citizen of a state. You join the military, and now you're both federal and state. And taking that oath and becoming one of those people, like a federal citizen, allows the federal government to then have jurisdiction. So, how do they get jurisdiction of Venezuela if Venezuela has not aligned itself or signed a contract with or become some sort of in some kind of way subjected itself to the jurisdiction of the United States? It's not subject to laws of the United States. I don't know what Trump is doing here. This is like, once you understand jurisdiction, you will understand how crazy this is. I mean, this is like off the rocker crazy. um okay, so both of these people arguing are right. Illegal aliens off federal lands, but in a state is a state matter, which is civil. But when illegal aliens enter federal lands, such as on a military post, even if those people are married to someone in the military, they're considered illegal aliens until they're given federal authority to be on a military post. They have to become citizens. Those those then are federal matters. If a Vietnamese woman marries a military person, she has no state in America. She has no documented citizenship of any state. She's only married to a military person, and that's it. She has to apply for citizenship, and she's supposed to apply for federal citizenship if she chooses to live on a military post with her husband. But then when she becomes a federal citizen and she moves over, she has to pick a place to live that may not be on a military post. And so she would be a citizen of a state. So, like me, if I'm born in Texas, I wasn't, but if I'm born in Texas, I get a Texas birth certificate and I'm a citizen of Texas. But if I join the military, don't lose my Texas citizenship. I'm still a Texan. And I know that from my DD 214 because it has my home address on it, which is when I joined was Texas. So I'm a citizen of Texas, but then when I join the military, I'm also a federal citizen. Okay, dual citizenship. So they're considered illegal aliens until it's federal. So throw your mind back to the federal law that speaks on conspiracies against the federal government, talking about Venezuela and the charges against Moderna, I think is his name. I can't remember now. Um, Venezuela is not under federal law. They're in an entirely different country. They're not subject to federal law. They are not subject to the jurisdiction of the federal government unless there's some agreement that I am unaware of that place them under federal authority. They're not under federal law, just like state people are not under federal law unless they are on federal lands or in the military or whatever. So this is basically the United States going around and just claiming people. They're just claiming lands and claiming people and taking over governments. They're just saying, well, you did this, and so we're saying that you broke our law and we're just going to take you over. And that's an excuse. And we talked about blending yesterday or the day before. And this is sort of like blending jurisdictions. They're trying to blur the lines. They're trying to confuse people. They're trying to help us remain ignorant by teaching us wrongly so that they can continue plundering, basically. Okay, so we, just being in America, are not under federal law because that's law of the United States. So I'm a civilian, I'm not under military law. So if we're not on federal lands, we're not under federal law. We, just being Americans, are not under federal law, even though people believe we are. We're all Americans generally. Even people in the military are Americans, consider Americans. But we're not under federal law, even though people believe we are. We are all Americans generally, but we are citizens of the state we are in. Those in the military are the 14th Amendment, um, as the 14th Amendment states, subject to both jurisdictions, federal and state, since most military people are on military posts and the military posts are in a state. But joining the military does not make you no longer a state citizen. It just adds a status of federal citizenship to your state citizenship. There are a ton of instances where the federal government has tried to expand itself through the courts and other ways to make us believe we are under their authority, but it is a lie. It's propaganda. Machiavelli says states lie, governments lie, rulers lie, they manipulate, they cause chaos when they need to, they do whatever they have to maintain power. And that's my understanding of Machiavelli. Some of these things I spoke of in my previous videos, and I've been speaking of them for several years now. People need to really start understanding this, because if we don't, we'll get what our willful ignorance buys us, a dictatorship. that will do whatever it wants, whenever it wants, for its own satisfaction, for its own satisfaction, no matter how bad the consequences are for us, the regular people. So stay tuned for more current events as they unfold. I'll keep bringing them to you. And please like, share, and subscribe.